Hello again, word lovers, and today I dip my toes into the waters of controversy. Why? Because we're speaking about political correctness, a quite recent idea in historical terms, and one which has infused every area of academic life. Now, this poses interesting questions for the etymologist, as a lot of the basis for the misuse of words or inappropriate use is that the words originated from some ancient insult, and you should know that. But what if you didn't know the etymology of a word? I was once told off for using the term salmon pink, as this was only the colour of the flesh of the salmon, as in when we eat it. Should I have thought of that before I said it? How about expressions like Chave and Pikey, used to describe members of a perceived underclass? Chav has almost as many etymologies as OK, council house and violent acronym. Cheltenham average, I heard. Chav just meant bloke in Kent, and perhaps our best bet is that it does kind of mean that. It means child, kid, chavvy in a Romany language. This learned etymology in fact roots it in the southeast of England, down Kent way. Chav was considered insulting. Pikey, meaning gypsy or traveller, is considered to be more insulting. And we have a first use in print for this. It's the Times of 1837. The Isle of Sheppey, the strangers who'd come in to help with the harvest, were referred to as turnpike travellers, meaning travellers of the roads, of the toll roads, but effectively a euphemism for tramp. Why does pike mean a toll road? Well, because a lot of the roads had pikes, as in the wooden pikes, shafts of wood placed across the entrances to roads so that only pedestrians could enter and horses couldn't. So they were called pikes, and when toll roads began to exist, which was in the 1670s, then they simply transferred that and said, there's a pike here, meaning you're going to have to pay in order for me to turn the pike away. Well, interesting as those etymologies may be, they give us no clue as to the possible offensiveness. Would etymology be any help in suggesting that women shouldn't be called birds or broads, for example, or by extension certain adjectives almost exclusively applied to women? Bossy, feisty, shrill of the voice. Etymology is no help here, I'm afraid. But if you moved into hysterical, we could trace that one back to the Greek word for womb, hystera, this from a Pi root, udtero, which is a variant of udero, which is more generally abdomen, womb or stomach. So here, etymology might say yes, indeed. If you don't have a womb, you can't, strictly speaking, be hysterical. Therefore, the word is inherently sexist or not, depending on your reading of that. The changing shades of meaning are no help, as well as we saw in an earlier installment. It's probably unkind to call somebody shot on goal lame or gay. Both of these have been fashionable as insults and challenged. Are we allowed to say somebody's crazy though? Or just mad in general? What about a word like an abbreviation of transsexual, a tranny? That's considered insulting. And people have argued for the word illegal to be illegal, at least when it refers to people, on the grounds that a person cannot be illegal. So a lot of it is a question of where you draw the line. Issues such as pronouns, she and he and ze, etc., might just be fashionable, we don't know. Maybe in the future they'll take hold, maybe they won't. But as I'm focusing on etymology, let's have a look at some words, two in particular, that people have argued should be taken out of the language because of their terrible etymological origins. Similarly to the hokey cokey, This is a dance. It used to be danced at parties and weddings and on occasions in England. Rumour had it that it's a satire on the Catholic Mass, so it's a Protestant anti-Catholic joke, so we shouldn't sing it. And that would be an argument based on we shouldn't sing it because if you knew the true origins of it, you wouldn't use it. So, just 2 words to talk about after that long introduction. One of them is related to the word that white people cannot say. It's referred to as the N-word. But I'm not talking about exactly that word, though as a sideline, I will mention poor old Anthony Williams, the mayor of Washington, who said in 1998, speaking of the budget, that he would have to be niggardly with the fund and had to resign because you just can't say that. Apparently, even if, in this case, it was correctly used and etymologically doesn't have a connection with the Latin word for Negro. It's actually an old English word, possibly derived from Scandinavian in around the 16th century, and meaning what it means today. Grudgingly mean, not wanting to spend things. Miserly. Chaucer proves this connection in 1374, where the word niggard is used exactly to mean miser. And etymological dictionaries don't seem to make a connection. But I'm going to talk about the phrase nitty-gritty. Legend has it that this means the detritus that accumulated at the bottom of slave ships, and so we should not use it. There doesn't seem to be any evidence for this. We're looking now at a time when words did appear in print. The American press was very free. The Oxford English Dictionary seems to have not heard of the term until the 20th century. But here we are on the edge of a detective mystery. We have to find out what happened to this word. Another idea is that people in the southern states, when wanting to talk about black issues, didn't want to say the word that we can't say. So they did a trick which children often use, inventors of slang and code often use. You take out the vowels, you jumble it up somehow, and instead of using, and on the basis of an N and a G and an R, make up a nonsense word, a nitty-gritty, rather like willy-nilly for whether or not. That sounds convincing. But then you think, so in the days of slaves, the white family sat down together and by some kind of code agreed that that word was on the level of a swear word or a blasphemy. Maybe, I doubt they would say, oh, we're not using it because it might offend the servants. Who knows? Maya Angelou remembers being punished by her mother for using the term. And there are other possible etymologies, one of them rather horrible. You'll have to look that one up. But there we are. We can arrive at a point where a southern states politician might use the phrase to get down to the nitty-gritty, and we wouldn't really know if this is what they call a dog whistle for white supremacists, or whether he really innocently just meant the basics. It's like being in a kind of maze. And as one commentator did point out, for all the etymological dictionaries in the world, these are agreements agreed upon by a group of people, but who are they, and are they right? This commentator said that he'd heard this story about the origin. The reason why you shouldn't say nitty-gritty was explained to him on an equality and diversity course. But he asked where that information came from, and received no reply, so he started looking for it in references to literature and didn't find any, except, as is posited, meaning the basics, the soil. He suggests it might even be connected with the grit of the soil. It doesn't even appear in an 1800s sailor's dictionary. There is a back and forth on this issue, as you can imagine. 2002, The Times. A man complaining about the political correctness of the police over this expression. But it turns out that the first printed appearance of Nitty-gritty was in Time magazine, August 1963. The comment here is, and remember this is several fashions ago, the Negroes present would know perfectly well that the nitty-gritty of a situation is the essentials of it. It is inconceivable that the phrase nitty-gritty lay dormant in black America for a century after the last slave ship sailed without somebody like Harriet Beecher Stowe writing it down, or a sailor's dictionary. All that said, even if people perceive that nitty-gritty referred to the effluent at the bottom of a slaving ship, and it's completely wrong, you might be perceived to be being offensive. I personally think the offence is in the delivery. Friends call each other the most awful names, and sometimes you can be very, very cutting without using an insult at all. If you use the word and hold up in front of the beak, just hope that the judge is a fan of etymology and play him Chuck Berry's song Club Nitty-gritty, or Shirley Ellis's song where she wants to get right down to the real nitty-gritty, or even a whole album from 1969 by the Nitty-gritty Dirt Band. Who remembers them? Well, times change and fashions change and attitudes change, so let's leave that most troublesome of words and expressions there and move on to exhibit number 2. It's 1992 now. Oprah Winfrey has Suzanne Harjo on as a guest. In this interview, Suzanne suggests that the word squaw means vagina, and said that'll give you an idea what the French and British fur trappers were calling all the Indian women, and you should never say that again. Many people joined in this crusade. Now I should explain, squaw is a word which if you read Indian folklore, or if you, especially our comic book pastiches of Indians, you'll find Big Chief, and also everybody will have the squaw meaning wife. Now, suppose it does mean vagina. Suppose it was the cultural norm. Suppose they had no qualms about it. Or does even our word queen come from the word quim, also used for sexual organs? Quim seems to go back to Middle English and mean a sort of a snug fit. So vagina, meaning a sheath, it's kind of the same concept. Does queen come from that? Is the queen our chief squaw? The traditional etymology for queen is, if you ask me, worse. It comes from an old Dutch word meaning a barren cow. Well, that's one route back. Another suggests that it goes back to a word which simply means wife, from the Pi root gwen, meaning woman. In any case, the myth was launched, and we shouldn't say squaw. But is the claim true? In Mohawk, Ojibwa means vagina, but the squaw word comes from European borrowing from Massachusetts, who had nothing to do with the Mohawks, apparently. They're an Algonquian tribe, which was not connected linguistically or culturally. Painting with a broad etymological brush, words for women tend to deteriorate in languages. In any case, they might start off meaning the loved one and end up meaning whore. Or they might start meaning maiden and end up meaning pert, saucy girl. In any case, these words have their own particular problems. The question here is, do we think squaw is an ethnic slur? Especially given that it's almost probably a false etymology, and probably just means wife, and probably only in the heads of white settlers, and probably never with any denigratory meaning. If it is true that you shouldn't use words once you know their terrible origins, then no more etymology for you. And I will leave the last word with another commentator from Ireland who describes himself as 100% Mick. Asks us, what about lioness, tigress, princess, empress? Effect, he goes on, can go either way, positive or negative. An insult can become a boast. Square was complimentary in 1900 and insulting in 1950. Protestant, expressionist, Bolshevik, as we saw in a previous installment, all began as insults, reappropriated. Is that the way to go? It's not my job to say.